Hey, 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 what is going on? Alex Linsky here for Prospecting on Demand. Just want to make sure that we're live in the group here and then we'll restart it and go from there in three, two, one. What is going on? Alex Linsky here for the Get More Client Show. As always, joined by my co-host Brian Downard. Brian, how you doing, buddy?
Living the dream, man. And for anyone who thinks the shirt is out of context, it's St. Patrick's Day today, so that's why I'm rocking this tee.
St. Patty's Day as of the day of filming. So if you're watching this later on, let us know how your St. Patty's Day was. Hopefully you don't remember it. That is the goal. Joking aside, thank you so much as always for joining us. If you are watching us on YouTube, please leave us a rating and leave us a review. Hit that subscribe button if you're watching on podcasts or you're listening on podcast apps like your favorite Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please let us know that you're listening. We really appreciate it. Always tell your friends about our amazing show so we can do more for you. That's the goal. Now, what we're going to cover today is a very special topic, something that is really important for any business owner at any level, and that is avoiding toxic clients. How to deal with toxic clients that take all of your time and the red flags to avoid on sales calls. Now, you've heard us talk before about giving a moose a muffin and dealing with some of the client horror stories we've had, but now what we're going to do is we're going to package it all in just one session for you to share with you all of the red flags you should be considering in order to make sure that you are going to avoid these crappy ass clients. Now, you might be wondering, why does this matter? Why is this important? Why should I avoid toxic clients? So let me ask you, Brian, why can't you work with toxic clients? What's the problem?
Yeah, so the number one reason is you fall into the freelancers trap of this classic model that most smaller marketers and agency owners fall into, where one or two clients quickly maxes you out because they take all your time, all your energy, all your resources, and maybe in a lot of cases you agree to do a certain thing for them, but you end up overcompensating for that. We talked a little bit about this on a previous episode, but when you're overcompensating for a result that's not happening by doing more and more, and you're still not getting the result, you're creating two negative situations where it's even more time you're committing and still not even achieving the result. So this is critical, and I got another number of items here of why this is important, but I would say the next piece in my mind is you're worth more than that. If you're here listening, you're committing to your personal success, your growth, learning how to get better inside with your business. You should be treated with respect. You should be treated better. If you have a client right now who's being disrespectful, you deserve more than that in your business for sure. And we like to say here in POD, this doesn't happen very often, but once in a while we'll have no client was a problem client or this wasn't a good fit for the program. Not the end of the world. Not everyone vibes with each other's personalities and styles. It's part of business. But this idea of addition by subtraction and the idea that we actually get more back by losing or getting rid of this client or realigning the expectation and reducing our time commitment to that client, we get so much more back by actually reducing what we do. So many times, not just with clients, but elsewhere in our life, we try and accomplish by doing more versus by trying to accomplish the same amount by doing less, right? Being more efficient instead of just throwing more crap on top of it. We're looking for an assembly line here, not just something where you have to come and be creative every single day because there's no scalability there. Again, overcompensating when not delivering is just a recipe for failure because you're not going to get the result. They're going to fire you or be upset or micromanage is the word I'm looking for. Micromanage you even more, and you will really just want to avoid that. So the last comment I will have here before I turn it to Alex, who I think has an idea and something he'd like to share on the why behind this, would be I don't want a single client to take down your entire business. This is so classic where I see a lot of people come in where they have a couple of clients, but one or two takes up all of their time, and then you have nowhere else to go or nothing else to invest in. So I'm going to turn this over to Alex, who, as I've come back here into the Riverside recording, seems to be back now. So welcome back.
Yeah, I don't know what happened with my camera, so we're gonna have to go with this one for this show. No big deal. That's how it goes sometimes. We have toxic camera going down today, so I'll just have to do it with toxic camera. Joking aside, though, one of the other elements of why this is so important to avoid toxic clients, toxic people, first and foremost, being an entrepreneur, you get to choose your time. You get to choose what you do with your time. You don't have a boss telling you what to do. A lot of people that watch this show probably resonate pretty strongly with the idea that the boss you have is probably your clients. The boss you have is probably your budget. Your boss you have is probably your bills. But in this scenario, if you can start making decisions out of abundance and not scarcity, that's how you'll actually say no to clients that aren't a good fit. The key is, are you bringing on clients that you originally thought were a good fit and then became toxic? Or did you realize initially that they were not going to be a good fit, but you still went on with it? And that usually is where the obstacles and problems come to play. And what we really want to cover today is helping you overcome those obstacles so you don't have to deal with toxic clients. Now, in terms of dealing with toxic clients, the first and most important thing to do is just maintain calm. Right? Now, maintaining calm can be very challenging. We understand this. We know a lot of people struggle with the idea of trying to chill out in the business model and trying to get the best results possible. But if you learn from what happened and how you generated a toxic client, it's the only way you can optimize. We shared this before in a previous episode that the only way you can actually lose or fail by losing a client is not learning on how to optimize and get that client better results long term, right? So if you're optimizing, if you are actually implementing things to avoid toxic clients in the future, then that initial toxic client you had in the first place might have actually been good for your business. Ironically, the addition by subtraction in a completely different way than what Brian was just talking about. It's also important to know when to say goodbye versus when to realign the relationship. If someone's disrespectful to you, if someone has personally attacked you or your family or your integrity, I believe personally those are hard red lines, right? Now, at the end of the day, we're not here to tell you what's conventional or not, or what you have to do or not. It's your business, it's your life, it's your decision. But I think it's pretty important that you have respect enough for yourself to realize that your integrity goes above any amount of money someone is paying you, right? That doesn't mean that Brian nor myself have never been treated poorly by clients, coaches, etc. We have. We've been there before. It's why we're doing this live. But there has to be a line at some point, and you have to identify what that line is. The next element is understanding why they became a problem in the first place, right? What is the obstacle? The easiest thing to do is to cast blame. Blame everything on them. One of the first things Brian did when he joined POD 3 years ago now, which is holy crap insane how fast time moves, right? One of the first things he did on our client success meeting was we were going on the call and I was talking about X client. I don't remember who it was, obviously. I was like, oh, that person didn't do X, Y, Z. And Brian comes in and he's like, hey, what if instead of blaming them, we took ownership, even if we're wrong, even if there's valid reasoning for them to have done the things that they're not supposed to do or didn't do the things they are supposed to do. What if we just took radical ownership of everything, even if it's seemingly outrageous, just so we can identify what we can personally do? And what Brian was really getting across there is the idea of only focusing on what you have control over, right? And the reality is you don't have control over how someone else's day went, whether their dog died, whether a client left, whether they feel sick, whether they're an asshole in general. You don't have control over those things. The only thing you do control is you, your team, your business, the ability to handle what you can handle. Now, if this happens where you have a toxic client, but it wasn't originally toxic and now the relationship is kind of spoiling like bad milk, the good thing is you can actually fix it. Now, can you fix bad milk? No, you should throw spoiled milk out. But in this scenario with bad clients or toxic clients, you can reestablish expectations, reestablish deliverables. This is the most common thing that Brian and I hear when someone's dealing with a toxic client. But they're paying me and they've been a client for this amount of time and they have this expectations. So you're allowing someone to set expectations and run the show where you become a provider or vendor instead of a partner. And that's the key. And you want to be treated like a partner. Reestablish expectations and deliverables to fit what matters to you and still works for them. And here's the key hint. You have to frame it as it's a benefit for them. That's the key. And if they can't accept that, you've got to feel comfortable to move on. And this is the same idea with reestablishing communication guidelines. A toxic client isn't someone that's just being rude to you, right? A toxic client is someone that's messaging you at 10:30 p.m. at night, thinking that it's totally reasonable and acceptable to do that. That's also a toxic client, right? I think a lot of people, Brian, are thinking toxic clients are the ones that are yelling at us. Yeah, obviously. But I also think there's toxic relationships in business where someone feels comfortable to email you on a Sunday or call your cell phone on late night Friday. Those things are unacceptable. And the only way to overcome that is reestablishing communication guidelines and expectations so you can set boundaries. If you don't set boundaries, you're giving moose a muffin. And again, what that is if you give an inch, they take a mile. And you have to have zero tolerance on these boundaries versus soft boundaries. So you can call them direct when it's been a while, or they can call you direct when it's been a while, or they can't call you at all. Don't give them enough wiggle room. Just focus on what you really want from this and avoid trying to be the nice guy. Just focus on what you can do to get them their results. That is the key. Now, Brian, you always talk about the ability of talking, like, don't be afraid to say no. And I think it would be unfair, frankly, for me to talk about not saying no, which is a really bad tongue twister. Because frankly, for everyone listening, I'm terrible at this. I'm so bad at saying no. Brian, teach us, wise one. How do we say no better?
Yeah, no, I think you and I are a good team because I err a lot of times on the side of how can we be more scalable? How can we help and support clients in a more scalable way that doesn't involve our direct input, where you tend to be more on the hands-on side, which I think a balance of the two is healthy. But for me, the ability to say no, first of all, comes down to the confidence in what your core offer is actually doing for them. And if they're asking you to go out of scope in order to achieve that, that's one of the first and most important things to consider. Alex, stop screwing with your camera while I'm talking, or my clips are never going to work. God damn it. So, guys, first of all, and this is why we're going to get to this in just a moment here, what you can have in place to be clear about what they are actually getting versus what's outside of the scope of that. Now, I actually want to go back and forth in a little bit of a conversation with you on this point, Alex, because we recently had an experience with a service provider who did draw a hard line in the sand for us and told us, no, they won't do certain things. And it kind of upset you a little bit. So there's this difficult gray area where, you want to be able to over deliver and provide above and beyond what you promised to a client, if it's within reason and also not outside of the scope of what you are comfortable doing. So if they were asking you to do something totally outside of the scope of, first of all, what they're paying you even to do and what you are comfortable even advising them on, you need to be comfortable to tell them that. People will respect you a lot more if you tell them straight up, this isn't something we do or can really help you with, but I can show you who can, versus trying to lie, be a pro, and pretend you have the answer and ultimately fall on your face and frustrate them longer term, right? And then sour the relationship forever. So I actually, just as an example of this, we were doing a warm call workshop earlier today with some of our clients, and they were asking, what if I have a warm caller calling on my behalf and they get a question they don't know how to answer, how do they deal with that so we don't look bad? It doesn't make you look bad if you say on the phone call to someone, look, that's really not what I cover, but I'd love to connect you with my business partner, so-and-so. That's really their area of expertise, and they're going to be able to really help you out. So having confidence in your lack of confidence around a certain thing you can't do and being genuine in how you're supporting them is critical right there. So again, don't give a moose a muffin. We'll dive into that just a little bit more in a second, but you'll understand what that means more in a minute. I would also say, in terms of dealing with toxic clients, to not let a disorganized client dictate your schedule and your day. You should have time blocks on your calendar very specifically for when you will do the work in the business. So that's client conversations, client meetings, etc. And maybe it's not you doing this at all. Maybe it's a project manager, but same for them. You want there to be the set time and even the expectation of the client where the meetings are planned in advance, so they're not constantly asking for a random call out of the blue. Because again, if you're starting to let them do that, that'll become the regular and they'll start to take advantage of that. But if you're allowing a disorganized client to consistently reschedule, to consistently cancel or no-show your meetings, and to just really expect you to bend over backwards for them, that is a toxic client, and frankly, again, something you need to be using some of what we're talking about in here to avoid and overcome if you have that issue currently. So let's talk about a couple of actual tangible real world things you can put into practice in your agency right now that can be the solution to this and you can start working with. Now, the first thing is what we call a service level agreement. Now, you might look at a service level agreement and think, oh, that's a proposal. But let me tell you the difference between a service level agreement and a proposal. A proposal is when you're proposing an idea or a concept to someone that hasn't yet been accepted and they have to say yes to that. We don't recommend doing this because, first of all, it creates too much friction in the sales process, and you should already have all the information they need or would want prepared on a sales call to give them and show them, so there is no ambiguity in the sales process. Whereas a service level agreement is an outline of what they will get after they have already agreed to work with you. So inside of the service level agreement, let's keep it really simple. I want you to very clearly write out what they purchased. So what are the actual tangible features of this? Is it Facebook ads? Is it Google ads? Is it YouTube, etc.? What are the tangible things they are getting? What is the expected outcome you will achieve for them? The Ascension promise, X amount of appointments, Z amount of leads, Y amount of more clients or conversion, whatever that outcome is you're aligned and expected to do. And this last part would be the communication expectations. Where will you communicate with them? I recommend one of three options. One, you either have a singular, this is the easiest, quickest version of this, have a singular support email, not your personal email, a separate email where they can send questions to, or a ticketing system where they could submit questions and then get responses there. The third option would be have a Slack channel where you keep all communication inside of that like we do. Now sometimes Slack can be a little bit too much to ask someone, especially if they're busy, like a doctor or a lawyer, to go do. So having a support email they can reach out to is a good place to start. And inside that SLA, let them know how long will it take for you to get back to them. Where else can they communicate with you? Critically, where can they not communicate with you? What will you not allow? What will you not go outside of scope? What is out of scope? And I think a lot of these things, if you're not sure what the answers are right now, you will find by just doing this in real practice, in the real world. This is what we said at the very beginning. Like, be calm. This is part of business. You have to go through the, oh crap, I let this client do that, right? Did this wrong or made this mistake in order to learn how to tweak that a little bit in the future. It's going to be part of the game. You're going to hit these obstacles no matter what. Each industry is definitely different, but you need to feel that out and kind of go through the growing pains of that process. So having that SLA, those elements will help, again, on a kickoff call in a new relationship, very clearly get on the same page with someone. Before I move on to the next piece here, Alex, is there anything else you would say would be smart to include in an SLA? Personally, I would say any legalities you might want to include around, maybe, I'm not a lawyer, we're not giving legal advice here, but I know for certain industries, there's certain laws like HIPAA, for example, for healthcare businesses, you have to adhere to certain things. So just make sure if there are any legal considerations for your niche, you have those in there as well for protections against your agency unless things go sideways. But I would consult with a lawyer.
I'd also add any guarantee conditions that you might have. If you are offering any sort of guarantee for leads or appointments set or ROI guaranteed, you want to have the guarantee conditions and the activation of that guarantee and what happens for it. You also want to consider a cancellation policy. You can do that in the positioning of what they agreed to purchase, and like, you need to give us 7 days notice to cancel, or you agree to 90 days of communication, whatever it might be. And also their responsibilities. If they're responsible to do something, even if you have like a completely done for you package, but they have to follow through or close deals, like clarifying exactly what they have to do in an SLA would also be really valuable to ensure that you achieve it. And the reason that you do this SLA again is to have a very strong expectation setting start with a client. A client today that we work with closed a new deal, and basically this guy said, hey look, I'm gonna team you up, or I'm gonna have you compete against another agency. I've got 4 locations, you're gonna take 2, and this other guy's gonna take 2. And the most important thing for expectation setting for this client that we're recommending is going to be, hey look, you're setting us up to compete, great, I'm happy to do so, I know we're gonna win, but here's the thing, I know what I believe needs to happen to win. I want to know what you need to see in order to identify what winning is. If you're both on the same page with the SLA, both on the same page with the expectation setting, both on the same page with identifying what equals a victory, what equals something that is satisfactory. It's really key. If you remember that show, or in a previous show, I explained that I worked with a gym. I brought them 100 leads. I thought I won, and then they fired me when I went to go do the renewal opportunity. And the reason behind that was because they didn't think 100 leads was good. I did, but I didn't clarify that up front. What they really wanted was appointments. That's what the SLA is for, to ensure that you're on the same page. And if you're not on the same page from day one, you're definitely going to have toxic clients. And toxic clients don't just have to be people that are rude or bother you all the time. It can just be a client that is wasting your time or energy, or not going to be a good fit for you long term. And I think this is really key, and it allows you to avoid giving a moose a muffin. And just a reminder of what that is, again, take an inch, or give an inch, take a yard, give an inch, take a mile, etc. The idea is, when you give a moose a muffin, then he wants to come inside. When he wants to come inside, he wants a full dinner. Then when he wants a full dinner, he wants to take a nap. And then later, he's kicking you out of your own house because he's taken over your bedroom and your wife. That's the idea here. You don't want to give a moose a muffin. By using the SLA, service level agreement, you have the right processes and systems in place to avoid it. And then, of course, making sure you have team members who understand the models that you're going through with the SLA. If your team members are breaking the SLA, then the SLA becomes null and void. So your team has to follow the SLA as well. Before we dive into red flags, I do want to talk about stories that we've had of toxic clients, because I think it's pretty silly to share or to talk about toxic clients without sharing some of the unfortunate experiences we've had with toxic clients. We're not going to name any names, of course, for any of you like desperately wanting to know. You probably won't know them anyways, but I'll share with you something that I find to be really funny.
So,
before we did PLB
Alex,
Live,
I hate to cut you off, but you're jumping ahead on us a little bit today.
Oh, okay. What did I jump ahead?
A very important element we need to get back to. I want to make sure we get this for them, because how do you actually now go about communicating to these issue clients, and how do we solve this? We call this an RGY call, right? Now, RGY call, maybe mentioned it briefly in the past. Red, green, yellow call shouldn't make sense maybe in that order. It should be, maybe green, yellow, red, or red, yellow, green. Who cares? Point is, you use this phone call as the opportunity to have a conversation with a client and discuss candidly the bottlenecks, the challenges, and the things we've been discussing. Don't do this back and forth over text messages. Don't do it back and forth over an email. I would put something in writing, an SLA, like we've been discussing, get it done in writing, get on the phone with them, have them verbally agree to that, and have that in a recording. So moving forward, you're covered on chargebacks, legally, etc. So you have it recording, and this could be in retrospect with current clients and moving forward in the future with new clients. Just making sure you're having this regular check-in point with them. And frankly, you shouldn't have to wait to be on that phone call to know if they are red, green, or yellow. You should already have an indication of that, unless they are holding something in and not sharing that with you. But this is your opportunity to uncover that and make it right or move on. So use the opportunity to get on the phone. Don't hide behind a computer. This is done best out in the open, face-to-face. Don't let there be ambiguity in the conversation. And funny side note, when you were talking about the giving a moose a muffin story and analogy, you said then it'll take your life, but I heard wife, so be careful because the moose.
I did say wife. I did say wife.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, that's scary. In Canada, mooses, they're violent, so they'll take everything.
They will kill you.
Yeah, let's talk now. I apologize for kind of backtracking a little bit there. I just wanted to make sure everyone listening had that critical piece and nuance. But yeah, let's move on now. Talking about red flags to actually avoid. So this is now, you're on a sales call or you're doing lead gen, you're having conversations with people. How do we not be blinded by the dollar signs? How do we compose ourselves, actually remove ourselves a little bit, kind of in the third person, and look subjectively at a conversation in a business and decide, should I work with this person or should I definitely pass on this business? So why don't you start us off, Alex, with some of those initial red flags?
I would say the first and most important thing is that every red flag will be subjective, right? So again, there's no black or white here. It's very dependent on your business, your style of coaching, your style of delivery, the way that you service your clients, who's servicing the clients, etc. I think one thing that's really important as well is we're talking definitely about avoiding toxic clients for you, the individual, the listener, but I think you should also consider trying to avoid toxic clients for your team. Like a good example would be if you're running a coaching program or you run a digital marketing agency, but you have a project manager or a coach and you're on a sales call with someone you know is going to be a toxic client, you shouldn't think to yourself, well, Brian's got a handle with this guy, so yeah, come work with us. That's really not the right thing to do. I mean, right or wrong is not necessarily the appropriate comment there. It's more so like, it's not what you would want to have your team member do to you. Don't do it to your team member either. So I think the first key is identifying what a toxic client would be to you and also to your team members, identifying what they would identify what is a toxic or non-toxic client. So for some examples, that might be a client that has no money. They're brand new. They're a startup. They're a completely nonprofit. They don't have any budget. They bitch about everything. Again, we've said this meme before, but the meme of like $500. They're like, this is the last of my dollars. I desperately need you. You got to change my life. If this doesn't work, I'm going to go bankrupt. And then you got the $5,000 client that's like, cool, where do I pay? We're good, right? So those are some red flags that you want to consider. If the offer is not validated yet, meaning they need your help building the offer as well as your lead generation engine as well, usually not going to be a good fit. They expect you to do everything. They expect you to sell for them. They expect that every deal is going to be as easy as selling a referral. All of those models are not effective. Unless you're like in e-commerce where it's an automatic sell, that's fine, but there's an exception there, but something to consider. If they want discounts up front or they want you to work up front for no cost and only do percentages on the back end, usually not a great opportunity. It's a last resort. You have to save them. Those type of clients, by far, biggest red flag. Definitely don't want that. Massive disorganization, saying that they've tried it 1,000 times before and it never worked. Unrealistic expectations, being rude on the call. These are some very important red flags you want to consider. But as you're listening to myself say it, and Brian's going to back up with some other ones right now, you really want to consider maybe I should take the time, when I say I, I'm talking to you. You should consider writing down what the red flags you would consider based on your niche, your avatar, your ideal customer, your dream customer, your worst customer. A lot of times we talk about the dream customer, like the ideal person. Have you ever considered the worst avatar though? Have you ever considered the client that was the worst? And it might be really easy for you. It might be, oh yeah, that was Bob, the client I worked with last month, and he was the worst. Cool, awesome. Bob is now the avatar. But if you haven't had it yet, probably at some point you will. At some point you will deal with a client that sucks, and you don't want to do that. So if you can learn from it, it will be really important. What other red flags should they consider, Brian?
Yeah, some of the ones that I'm going to share here are definitely more nuanced in that you probably maybe not even consider when you are talking to people. But one of them, and the next two will sort of be in the same category, but the first one is their lifetime value of their client is just too low. I love to use the analogy of like, if you worked with a pizza shop that's main selling, our core offer, main selling point is slices of pizza at lunch, or you work with, say, a car dealership, the price points of those products are massively different. You sell one or two cars for a car dealership, they're making an absurd ROI on a few $1,000s, even more, $5,000 to $10,000 as an ad spend. Whereas if you want to charge $1,000 to a pizza restaurant, how many slices of pizza at like $2 a slice? And it's a hypothetical question. We could do the math, but you'd have to sell a lot more people pizza slices just to even break even, let alone have an ROI healthy enough to get some excited about making that investment, right? So consider what is the value of my clients' clients. Do I only have to get them a couple of clients to get a good ROI, or do I have to get them a lot of clients? And if it's the latter, then you're probably not in the right niche or really want to avoid those types of clients who don't have a high ticket, high value offer to sell. The next piece sort of falls in line with this, but this is a very important consideration when you're actually selling someone. And just because someone gives you their time to talk about what you do and they're interested, doesn't mean you should pitch every single person. You need to actually have a clear understanding, is there a potential ROI here for this person? Now, too many people, and this is a good qualifier and even a disqualifier in the sales conversation to make someone feel comfortable, one, about working with you, and two, that you're only going to make them an offer out of integrity. So before you got into your actual offer or what you do, I would work with a client on a phone call to do a typical ROI calculation. Now, if you know your industry really well inside and out, you could probably already have this in part of your presentation. For example, shout out Larry Hickman, works with water and fire damage businesses. He has in his sales deck what he knows the average close rate is, what the average value of a a service or a cleanup job is and what the average number of leads they can get you are. So with that, you can start to work backwards. Hey, so we see about a 50% close rate. Is that what you're seeing? Awesome. Each project's worth about $5,000, right? Awesome. So you're saying if we got you about 6 leads, you get about 3 of those at $5,000 each. You're looking at about a $15,000 ROI. Are we on the same page here? Got it. Well, good news. We only make offers to people who we actually know there will be a good ROI here for, because I don't want to make an offer to someone who's not going to make money. So you are a great fit for what we actually do. Let's go deeper into this conversation. But be willing to get off of a phone call and move away from someone who there just isn't an ROI there for. Maybe there's a potential to be referred to someone they know. Maybe they can connect you with an industry group so you could get access to, but ultimately you want to act out of integrity, sell a product to someone that you can actually make money for, not just someone who is willing to pay you, because that won't last long and they'll ultimately be frustrated, create frustration on your end, and bad word of mouth if you know you can't really make them good money and you can't retain them long term. So make sure
you'll also feel like crap, you know? Like you're gonna just feel like crap long term. Like eventually at some point it's gonna catch up to you. If you're listening to this and you don't give a shit about the other person on the other end, maybe not, but I would estimate you probably are not listening to our show. You might be listening to like Grant Cardone or something. Yeah, that's a shot, no doubt, 100%. But the reality is, like, if you actually care about the people you work with and you go from a place of integrity, at some point you realize like, my business's job is not to just get paid, it's to get the result, because the byproduct of getting a result is getting paid. Now, it doesn't always work that way, obviously, because there's things outside of your control, but if you do your best, which is the only thing you can do, this thing that says POD culture right here used to say actions over outcomes. I would change it every episode, but changing that thing is a huge bitch, so I don't. So it just stays there. But it used to say actions over outcomes. But that's really key. Like you got to be able to feel comfortable working from a place of integrity as opposed to the alternative. Any other red flags?
Yeah. So back to the revenue piece. If they can't commit to a recurring charge, and like you have a minimum, say, of 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, whatever in your contract, if they can't commit to a recurring charge, and if they constantly have to like be sent a manual invoice and like randomly pay with checks, like, oh, I'll pay you like in a week, or sometimes it takes 2 weeks, sometimes they forget, and or they have to like move money around constantly, that is a big red flag. You need someone who has the expectation of what the investment is and be capable of making that investment over a minimum of a 2 to 3 month period without the expectation of having an immediate ROI. If someone needs to make money the first month working with you to work with you the second month, that is a red flag. They do not have a long-term mindset. They are likely acting out of scarcity, and you will be one of the first things to go away the second they don't get the exact result they want. Again, the difference between someone who's willing to only pay a little bit of money because it's their last money they have in the world versus someone who's already doing well and just like, yeah, just take it over for me. I trust you're going to get the result and in the time and expectation you set for me. So very critical element there as well. I would say also, we maybe covered this a little already, but people who are just control freaks and they nitpick everything. Like if you're on a sales call and they're just trying, they're already, showing indications of like, man, this person is just over the top. They're trying to get every single detail. They're trying to micromanage the process already. They want to know too much. They're trying to get too involved. They're nitpicking everything you do. That's a red flag. You are the expert. You need to own that. You need to be willing to tell them, look, trust me when I tell you that I've got this. You do what you do really well, and I'll do what I do really well, and we'll both be successful together, okay? But if they're trying to take over your process and like have their hands in everything, it's going to break your scalability and obviously your proven process that you know can get them the result if you're just trying to make them happy by doing what they think will work versus doing what you know can get them the result, right? This is the balance of...
Brian, I think that piece is so important. I think that piece you're talking about is so important because a lot of people will disagree with what you're saying. They're like, no, you should do what the clients say. Client's always right. Like that type of attitude. It's like as if you went to a doctor and the doctor tells you that the disease you have is treatable if you do this, this, and this. And you're like, well, I was thinking I would do this and this instead of that and that. And the doctor would be like, what are you talking about? Right? Like, what are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense. Listen to what I'm saying. I'm the expert. At the end of the day, Brian's totally right here. You have to trust your expertise. And if you let them walk on you either in the sales call or the kickoff or the review call. If you have a third call, some people do like reviews of ads or reviews of whatever it might be, which by the way, in and of itself, you don't have to have because they should just trust you. But in and of itself, that model is how you end up getting toxic clients because they just want to own every process. You want to have a partner, not vendor relationship. I think that's a really good piece of advice. Anything else, Brian?
Yeah, a couple more. I would say if they're a bad communicator, if before you've even gotten on a sales call, they are all over the place, they can't get their email straight, they aren't answering their phone, you can just tell, like, man, this person feels unorganized, then it's a big red flag. You got to make sure you ask, like, hey, are you actually capable of managing this? Is your team available and have the capacity to deal with this? Otherwise,
100%.
you'll send them leads that are qualified. They won't touch them because they're bad communicators, and then you will ultimately fail because it didn't close. Now, in this same vein, something else people probably don't consider is, what do their online reviews say? How is their reputation? You could do everything right, but if they either, one, suck at their job and when they do get someone on the phone, totally blow it and drop the ball, or two, scare people away before ever getting on the phone because someone did their research and saw, wow, this person kind of sounds like they suck, that is going to spoil and ruin your ability to actually be successful for them. So if they don't have a good reputation, if they're jerks, if they're any of these things that when you send a good qualified lead to them, they're not going to be an effective business owner and nurture that, convert it appropriately, again, you'll ultimately be blamed even if it isn't your fault. So avoid the heartache and make sure you are avoiding clients with those red flags. So let's take the last part of, I'll say piece part. I was like, part. So I just put them together. But it's a new word. I like it. Let's talk about some stories, actually, from toxic clients. Some of you might appreciate
Definitely.
this. We've all dealt with.
Yeah.
I'll lead with one. When we were a new agency, we didn't really know what our offer was. So we would sell anything and everything just if someone needed help. Hey, you want lead gen? Okay. You want content? Okay. You want SEO? Great. So we had a guy, and this, again, smart business owners can kind of smell that out and take advantage of that and nickel and dime you, negotiate because they know you're not really clear and have certainty in what your offer is. We had a guy who we agreed to do like 3 months of SEO at $2,000 a month, and we trusted him because he was a referral from someone who I really trusted and cared about. And he had us send the invoice and do the kickoff call, like, all right, great, and assured us he would pay. And we got in there for a week, did some work, assured us, no, it's coming. I'm going to pay you next week. I just have to move some things around. Okay, no problem. I trust this guy. A week later, same thing. Got to move some things around. So we had to stop. Okay, are we actually going to get paid? Guess what? We never got paid, ever. And we did 2 weeks of work for free on top of all of the other bullshit of having the conversation with him, onboarding him, getting access to the portals, getting access to the website, wasting my time, my team's time, and ultimately never even getting paid. And I think that was because he felt the lack of certainty and clarity in what we were actually going to provide for him. So he sort of just was using it as a way to get some consulting and see if he liked how we did things. Apparently he didn't.
Yikes.
I don't know if he would have paid either way. So that was one of my first experiences with a really toxic client. I'm curious, Alex, if you've got any you want to share.
Yeah, I'm going to go a little bit newer rather than back in the day. I have a couple from back in the day too. But one of them that really stands out to me is a piece of language that someone we worked with told us about. Last year for POD Live, we hired a coach to help us in running an effective event because we were going to offer our Scale 7 Mastermind for the first time, which is our 12-month program. Elite is our 6-month program. We did a great job at the event. This guy helped us a ton beforehand. It was really a fantastic experience. And basically what he was talking about is the importance of like making sure you have enough team members to talk to the hottest leads there, but also supporting people that won't be the right fit. And he said 2 words as one really that I had never heard before that maybe I remember this very clearly, audibly laugh out loud at the time and not really understand it until it happened. And it's similar to a toxic client. It's not exact, but it's pretty close enough. I would say maybe it's toxic prospect, but it's still funny. He was like, people at events are energy vampires. That was what he said. He was basically expressing that people will not care that there's 130 people there. It's just you and them, and they want to take all your energy, all your time, and drain it away from you when they have absolutely no intention of ever working with you. And it sounds callous, and it sounds like a rude thing, and I kind of felt that way when I heard it. And then at the event, of course, there were several energy vampires. Now, an energy vampire doesn't mean they're a bad person or they're even annoying in any way. It just means they don't necessarily understand how much they're asking of you when you have an event with 130 people there, which is what we dealt with. And there was definitely multiple conversations we had. I remember on the end of night 1 and night 2 where Brian and I are sitting back like, oh my God, did you talk with X? Man, energy vampire. So we had a couple of those, obviously not going to name names. And again, even if we did, those people are good people. They're not bad people. It was just really funny how that ended up happening. I would say that was toxic, but not in a terrible way. In terms of a terrible way.
When you have clients, right? If you have 130, which would be great, 130 clients, each of them only looks at the world through their own lens and believes that their thing is the most important and deserves the most energy and time. But classic, if you give them some muffin, you don't draw a line in the sand soon, eventually they'll be living in your home with you or taking over the lease to your house. So,
and this is why Brian was talking about saying no. This is why you were talking about saying no earlier. Yeah, it's so important. The other toxic client I dealt with, and then Brian, you can kick it back and we'll close the show for today. The other toxic client I had was the first time we did a pay per lead model. We worked with an attorney and we did a pay per lead model. And I remember this very distinctly because I made a huge mistake, and it's a good lesson for everyone listening. We did a pay per lead model instead of an upfront payment, because the math that I did was basically I could get double the amount of money if I just got standard numbers that I had gotten from the other attorneys I worked with. We were doing Google Ads at the time, and I can't remember exactly what the offer was, but I think it was like $150 per booked appointment, and we were like getting them at like $30, $40. So it was easy, like, oh, I was gonna make a ton of money. And the guy, I remember this attorney asked me like, okay, are we gonna sign like a contract and everything? I'm like, well, like, do I have to? Like, are we gonna go to court for this? Like, I'm not gonna fight an attorney for this. He's like, no, don't worry about it, it'll be all good. So the month ends, which I should have gotten paid earlier, but the month ends, I'm like, okay, here we are, this is what we had in the numbers. And he fought me on every single one of the leads. And I don't remember exactly what it was, but let's say it was 10 of them and we were gonna get paid, like, I don't know, 15 grand or something like that, 10 grand. Which was a lot of money to me at the time. Not that it isn't a lot now. I'm just saying in general, at that time it was much different. Like I didn't have any nest egg at all. So it was like, hey, are you really trying to fuck us right now? Like you told me that we didn't have to sign a contract and you're arguing with me about every one. He's like, nope, that Michelle was a referral. Nope, that one came from here. Nope, that wasn't you. Nope. And I didn't have GHL or a tracking attribution system or anything like that to showcase or prove it. I had some Google Analytics, but he would still argue with me on everything. I think he ended up paying me for 3 total clients, which was almost like $2,000 less than what I would have charged from a normal retainer. So that was really crappy, a terrible experience. I was extremely butthurt about it for a long time too, not even just a little bit of time, to be fair. I was really peeved. And I think because of that, and if I'm being transparent, I think because of that, I really lead a lot of our clients to avoid the pay-for-performance model because of that experience. And that was probably my worst toxic client experience in agency world.
Got it. I got one more, and this is actually a group of clients, and this is interesting where it was my fault that they became toxic, and this happens, right, where it's not the client's fault, it was your fault because you didn't have an expectation or a true understanding of what it takes to deliver the outcome. So no fault of their own, but you put yourself into a corner. Let me give you the story. So first real business, I would say, was when we made iPhone apps, and we would charge an upfront rate of around $3,000 to $5,000 to actually make the app. It wasn't from scratch. We had like a template we could use, which was great. But it's not like one of those what you see is what you get nice, sexy editors. We had to like play with some code, do some file edits. Okay, so be it. We're new agency owners. We're like, hey, $3,000, $5,000 a pop. Whew, we're rich. But what are we gonna like charge to maintain it after the fact? How about $50 a month? That sounds like a great idea. And so we had at the peak of that app business 6 different clients with apps, each paying us $50 per month.
Oh my God.
Every single time we have to do an update, it was like pulling teeth. Like at least a 10, 15 minute minimum to do a simple change. Like, hey, I need to change out this thing. 10 to 15 minute minimum to change that each time. And I created the toxic relationship because I didn't know what I needed to effectively charge or had an expectation for how to manage it after the fact. Again, more proof in the pudding of you have to sort of learn and jump out of the plane, build the parachute on the way down. Like I was still learning. I'm still falling out of the plane, trying to put the parachute together. You got to learn these things in practice. But I created the toxic relationship and ended up resenting my clients for something that wasn't their fault because I sold them an offer that I didn't know how to appropriately internally fulfill for my company. So that was a hard lesson to learn. But again, it actually came back again later down the road when we did websites, and I was only charging $500 to $1,000 a month, which sounds like, oh, that's better, but still.
You're like, why wasn't it 50, Brian? I want it for
I
$50.
learned my lesson, but it still wasn't enough to validate the time that they wanted from me. Now, I think different services like design, websites, content, there's too much room, in my opinion, for ambiguity, and there's too much objectivity of like, hey, I want this versus that. And so there's always scope creep where it takes longer to do something than you thought because a client had a different version, and you overcompensate because, oh yeah, now I'll make graphics, or I'll go make this page, and now I got a new feature for the website. And again, you end up overcompensating like I was trying to do versus actually just getting the freaking result and charging appropriately for that. So I think this was a great episode. A lot of things that I think all agency owners know that they go through without question and should be avoiding as they grow. You're not immune to this. We still have clients that aren't always the best fit. But again, it's part of the game. Acknowledge that. Know that it, don't take it personally, and we can wrap up today's episode from there. But I thought this was a lot of fun. Alex, anything else you want to say before you bring us home?
Yeah, thank you guys so much for joining us. As always, if you watch live in our group in the Seven Figure Culture, thank you. If you're on YouTube watching the replay, we appreciate it. If you're on our YouTube clips and just grabbing the small bits, we appreciate it regardless. If you're listening on podcasts, thank you so much. You can find the Get More Clients show wherever you listen to your favorite shows. Thanks for dealing with me during my stupid camera changes. I'll try to get it right next time. Still working through it, only on the 12th episode. We'll keep getting better. We hope that you've enjoyed these shows. Thank you so much for your time. We always appreciate it. Brian, I'll see you on the next one.
See you guys.